How quickly can you identify someone? I mean, someone you know, someone you've seen before, how quickly can you identify them? I know some of this is based upon our vision. Some of you can see better than others. Some of you claim that I'm a handsome man, and some of you can actually see. But we're going to play a game. Is it okay if we start with a game? And I know we've got some watching online, some watching whether on their TV screens or a tablet. You get to play too. So what we're going to do, I'm just going to quickly go through some images, and you are just going to identify them as fast as you can. I'm thinking maybe 3 seconds. You guys think you can do it? Just images will come up. I'll give you about 3 seconds. For those of you watching at home, just yell at your screen. It's cool. Go ahead. So I've got 7 images coming up, about 3 seconds, and just, identify who it is. I'm going to make it easy on you to begin with, and then we'll get a little bit harder. Are we ready? Okay, here we go. All right, here they are. You guys did terrible. All right, we had Christopher Reeves, Carrie Fisher, Benedict Cumberbatch. We had Tim Allen, Judy Garland, Daniel Radcliffe, and Julie Andrews. You guys failed miserably. Or maybe it's like school where the quiet one's the actual genius. They're just saying it to themselves. What just happened is you guys quickly could identify the character, but you didn't identify the person, okay? And those of you online who didn't say it out loud are laughing like, oh, I got it right. We know how it goes. Now here's the point of this. Here's what I want you to see. A theatrical mask, and this is actually an ancient mask that would have been used in theater. A theatrical mask from the 1st century is where we get the term hypocrite, okay? In the Greek, we get hypocrites. That's my closest to the Greek you'll get. And it means an actor. Okay, so as we go back, you could quickly name the character. We didn't name the actor, per se. And as we're talking about, again, we're on week 2 of a study on the table, and the study of one, how Jesus gathers around the table and how we gather around the table. I want to talk about manners today. And I know this could be a difficult one, because some of you, we talk manners and like your knuckles or your backside immediately feels sore. Because you had some stuff drilled into you as a child. And there are certain things that you need to do. But what we're talking about is our manners in the presence of the Lord. And when we kicked off this series last week, we talked about the table and the wedding, where we see the very first miracle takes place at a wedding. And when we look into the distant future, we hear of the table. We hear of the wedding feast surrounded by the Lamb. And as we walk forward into that, we're taking an honest look at how we gather around the table. We're taking a look at how Jesus gathered around the table. But this is the main point of the whole sermon. I'm going to give it to you right here. To understand table manners, there's to be no hypocrites. As we gather, there's not to be anyone acting. And we've got to understand this. Purity. Purity comes not from our performance. You will not be able to wash your hands to the point of your pure. And I don't care if it's Ivory 99.9% pure soap you're using. You will not be able to wash yourself into purity. We cannot get to purity based upon our performance. We're going to try, though, but we shouldn't. And what we've got to understand, purity comes solely from a heart washed by Jesus. That's the only way we can come into a place of purity. And so we've got to understand as we gather around the table, both as we share the Lord's Supper here in a little while, but also as we come to the Lord, there can be no hypocrites. And I want to get into this. Our text is going to be in Luke 11. And if it is okay with you, really you don't have a say in this. I'm just going to tell you, so it's got to be okay. We're going to stand. I'm going to read through the section of text, and then we'll walk through it. So if you'll join me in honoring God's word just by standing for a moment. And I will have it on the screen. If you have not been able to get your thumbs caught up, that is okay. It's going to be on the screen. But I'm going to read through, and then we'll talk about it. Verse 37. As Jesus was speaking, one of the Pharisees invited him home for a meal. So he went in, he took his place at the table. His host was amazed to see that he sat down to eat without first performing the hand-washing ceremony required by Jewish custom. Then the Lord said to him, "You Pharisees are so careful to clean the outside of the cup and the dish, but inside you're filthy, full of greed and wickedness. Fools, didn't God make the inside as well as the outside? So clean the inside by giving gifts to the poor. You'll be clean all over. What sorrow awaits you, Pharisees, for you're careful to tithe even the tiniest income from your herb gardens, but you ignore justice and the love of God. You should tithe, yes, but do not neglect the more important things. What sorrow awaits you, Pharisees, for you love to sit in the seats of honor in the synagogues and receive respectful greetings as you walk in the marketplaces. Yes, what sorrow awaits you, for you are like hidden graves in a field. People walk over them without knowing the corruption they are stepping on. Teacher, said an expert in religious law, you've insulted us too in what you just said. Yes, said Jesus, what sorrow also awaits you, experts in religious law, for you crush people with unbearable religious demands, and you never lift a finger to ease the burden. Real quick, if you'll lift a finger with me, we're gonna raise this up to the Lord. Father, guide us in our study this morning. By your Spirit, may we hear you. May we come to understand you. May we be guided in the presence of your word to understand how we can gather around your table. All glory, all praise to Jesus the King, in which we pray. Amen. You may be seated. It makes me really happy when I open my eyes and you all actually listen. You have your fingers up. It makes me, as a preacher, that just makes me really excited. We're going to walk through this text a little bit by little bit and get to this point of understanding table manners. But as Jesus was speaking, now recognize what's going on here. Jesus is going around, crowds are gathering, they want to hear what he's saying, but all of a sudden we've got some religious leaders that think, well, wait a second, I'm not getting these crowds. People aren't coming to me. Let me get this guy, let me see what's going on. And so one of the Pharisees invites him home for a meal. Now, this would have been a pretty big deal to be invited into a religious leader's meal. It would have been a very formal occasion. So Jesus goes in and he takes his place at the table. Wouldn't have had chairs. There would have been kind of a reclining. The feet behind you, you kind of lean forward into almost kind of a lowered table. And the religious leaders, think about this. They're already wanting reasons to be angry with him. They're amazed to see that he sits down without first washing his hands. And some of you are like, that's gross. You should always wash your hands before you eat. This is not a hygiene issue at all. This is not a hygiene issue. This is a performance issue, not a purity issue. This is a showy thing, not a sanitary thing, okay? And Jesus doesn't do it, all right? We've got to understand something. There's two very different things. There are things that are unbiblical, and then there are things that are extra-biblical, okay? The Pharisees and the religious leaders, they added so much extra. And now what Jesus is doing, he is not countering something that's unbiblical. He's countering the extra biblical. All right? And what he's doing, he's skipping the hand washing. But what's awesome here as I move forward, in verse 39, Jesus has got some serious mom energy. What I mean by that, when you know, like you've done something, and like you're thinking about it, that's exactly when your mom asked you. Have you noticed that? Like when there's something you're hiding, or like you had a terrible day at school, you got called in the principal's office, and you're thinking, and then that's when mom's like, oh, so tell me how school went. And she hasn't asked that in 2 weeks. You're like, what? Or you know when you've done something and like mom knows. Like Jesus knows what they're thinking. Jesus knows where they're at. And without them even saying anything, he just speaks directly to what they're thinking. He says, oh, you Pharisees. You're so careful to clean the outside of the cup and the dish, but inside you are filthy. You're full of greed. You're full of wickedness. How's the vibe go at that meal? You know, how are things going now? You've got this teacher, Jesus, surrounded by religious leaders, and he just calls them all out. He just directly calls them all out. And so all of a sudden, there's going to be a little bit of tension. And there's something I need to say now, because it's going to happen throughout this, and I want you to understand. Sometimes correction is the kindness. We have an image of Jesus as joyful, loving, and kind, and sometimes we need to understand in the correcting, Jesus is being kind. Some of us are terrible at being corrected because we will not humble ourselves to the fact that maybe there's a chance we're wrong. And here's what's hard. In the current culture we live in the current demographic, I feel bad for those of you working in education, because it's like, hey, teach, but don't ever tell them they're wrong. Like, how do you do that? Like, how can you teach without getting on someone's case? You know, and all of a sudden, correction in a sad way has almost become labeled abuse. And so we can look at this with a certain lens and say, well, Jesus is being a jerk. No, Jesus is being utterly kind, and that he is laying out this correction. And the hearts that receive this have the choice to hear and go, yeah, you're right. Or for those hearts that can harden. And so we need to understand this is going to be going on. It's going to happen a couple times. Jesus is talking. He says, you clean the outside, but the inside is absolutely filthy. And he goes on and he says, fools. Listen, that's the context of which we take it, okay? You are a fool. No one really takes kindly to this unless, you do something foolish. You should say, yeah, you're right, I am a fool. Jesus says, fools. Didn't God make the inside as well as the outside? Clean the inside by giving gifts to the poor, and you will be clean all over. He is being absolutely kind and trying to correct them. But they're not quite getting it. They're not quite seeing it. Some of you are of the generation. Do you guys remember? You go back a decade, a little more. Do you remember when TVs were as long as they were wide? Remember that? Like TVs now, they're like an inch deep. Okay, but some of you recognize, like, to move a TV took 2 to 3 people. You know what I'm saying? Okay, and that was even like a small one. You're like, oh, this was a beast. And so there was a demographic, and some in here, you're younger, you don't recall this, but there was kind of that whole song, deep and wide with a color screen. Is that the song? No. But that's kind of the way we lived. The TVs were deep and wide, and they were a square. All right? And then all of a sudden, they got wider and thinner. And everyone's like, well, I got to get one of those. And I remember a guy in Nashville telling me, he worked at one of the electronics stores. He said, man, when those flat screen TVs first came out, a lawyer came in and dropped $12,000 for a 20-inch one. And I was like, that's hilarious. Because you think about now how cheap they've gotten, but that was the brand new thing. And I remember, and I'll explain this image in a second. I remember as we got our first flat screen TV, HD TV. You guys remember going from one to the other? It's like we went out of the Stone Age and into, oh, wow. And I remember it was the time when we had just got Reed home. And so Gray is still really young. And as a parent, there's only so much PBS Kids and Disney movies you can take. There comes a point where you're like, I can't do anymore. And so what I realized, there's not much else that's kid appropriate until I realized nature documentaries. And we had a brand new, HD TV. It was fun to have. And I went out and bought the Blu-ray of the series Life from BBC. And this was fantastic because Gray would just sit there. And he'd interact with it. When the music would start and things would get difficult, he'd kind of hide. And I was just like, this is great. He may be messed up as he gets older, but that's okay. This is fun. And he would interact. And I remember because Reed was a newborn, and one of the beautiful things about raising a newborn is at some point you're like, how do we eat? And as a church family, it's awesome when someone comes in and brings food. And a buddy of ours, Sam, came in and he brought us dinner. I knew Sam very well. Sam was one of those guys that was, you know who I'm talking about. They always want the bigger and the best. And they go out and get it. And Sam, we had been at his house not too long ago. He had a big old HD TV. It was awesome. Watched a little football on it. But he's acting just like Gray, staring at the documentary. And he's like holding a pan of lasagna. He's like, And I still remember this. He goes, "Why does it look so good?" I was like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "I'm watching live on mine at home and it doesn't look as good." I was like, "What do you mean? You've got a huge TV. I saw your TV. It's awesome." He goes, "No, man, it does not look this good." I said, "I don't know. I just put the Blu-ray and it works." He goes, "Oh, you watch Blu-rays." He had put all his money into this big high-definition screen, and he was inserting into it the old standard definition technology. Does that make sense? This is what Jesus is talking about. We want this appearance to be really great, but we're sticking the old stuff, the standard stuff, or frankly, the stinky stuff in. And we've got to understand it's from the interior that's what's displayed. Okay? You could be the biggest HD TV you want to be, but if you're watching an old VHS on it, it's not going to look great. And so we've got to understand it's the inside that counts. It's the inside. And if you want an HD display, you've got to care about the HD quality content that's coming through it. You've got to be in that place. And some of us wonder why, I'm doing what everyone else is doing. Why do I not feel the same? Why is it that I'm kind of going through the same steps they are, but I'm just not where they're at? It's the content. It's the place of what we're putting into our heart. All right? Moving forward. And verse 42, Jesus replies, "What sorrow awaits you, Pharisees?" I know some of you that are reading through the ESV or some other translations, you have a better take. NLT says, "What sorrow awaits you?" But those of you with different versions, you just got one word, 3 letters. Woe. Such a better translation. Woe to you. Listen, next dinner conversation, when someone disagrees with you or says something, just drop a woe to you. Just see how it goes. Oh, woe to you. It needs to come back. But in the NLT, it says, "What sorrow awaits you, Pharisees?" Not as cool as, "Woe to you." But you're careful to tithe even the tiniest income from your herb gardens. But you ignore justice and love of God. Here's what's happening. The Pharisees, in their own, would have a little herb, and they would look and they would count the little leaflets. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And they'd go through, and every 10th one they would take aside, and they'd walk in. "Here's my herbs. Look at me. Here's my offering. Here it is." He's not knocking tithing. He goes, "Listen, you should tithe, yeah. But don't neglect the more important things. Don't neglect the more important things." What is he saying? Listen, giving is not the most important thing. It's where our heart is in relation to God. Giving shouldn't be the focus of a church. It should be in that heart place of being close to and growing with God. For me personally, one of my favorite things, as you change things coming out of COVID, we haven't passed a plate in years. And you know why I like that? I'm not knocking this church. I'm just across the board. How much money was just guilt offerings? To me, there's something awesome. Like, there's just a box in the back. And if you're overjoyed, you have some excess, we place it in the box. And to me, that's how it should be. Rather than let me bring in every 10th herb. Hey guys, look at me. That's at all what it's supposed to be. To understand that there is something more important. And here is the thing. He's saying you ignore, and when he says justice and love of God, he's striking up something that they have been walking through since they were an infant. A verse they have heard over and over, and it's Micah 6:8. And Micah says this in regards to what religion or what the church should be about. He says, "He's shown you, O man, what is good. What does the Lord require of you? Act justly, love mercy, walk humbly with your God." And since infancy, these Pharisees have known it's to be act justly, loving mercy, walk humbly with their God. But yet they've corrupted it and made it about a showy appearance. Walk humbly with your God. Woe to you, Pharisees. Tithing is not the most important. It's not a look at me, it's a God, I have a love for you. Moving forward, woe, what sorrow awaits you, Pharisees, for you love to sit in the seats of honor in the synagogues and receive respectful greetings as you walk in the marketplaces. Let me give you the picture. In the synagogue, there was kind of more of a rectangular but circular format in which people would sit. And the religious leaders, they wanted the seats up front. They wanted the seats where twofold, they could be seen and they could see you. All right? Only once in my preaching past have I been where I had to sit in a seat and watch them. So awkward. I don't know if you guys have been at churches where they have kind of the thrones on the sides. You just kind of wait your turn. And I remember just this is so uncomfortable. But just sitting there and watching, but they loved that. Because one, it was a, look at me. And at the same time, they could have a snooty, I'm looking at you. And he's saying that's not what it's about. And we've got to understand in our context, it isn't all about attendance. It isn't all about, hey, look at me, I'm here. Look at me, I'm here. Hey, I made it. It's about, God, I have a love for you. God, I absolutely love you. And whether you throw me in the back room, whether you stick me with some kids, whether you just place me wherever, I love you and I want to be here for you. I want to be surrounded by the family. I want to walk in faith. It's not to be a look at me. It's to be, I have a love for you, God. And then he goes on, and now he's going to talk about appearances. Yes, what sorrow awaits you, or better said, woe to you. You're like hidden graves in a field. People walk over them without knowing the corruption they are stepping on. As people gathered in Jerusalem, as they made the pilgrimage and walked from so many different ways, graves were just kind of wherever they needed to be, but generally, in an effort to keep everyone ceremonially clean, they would whitewash the stones that were near graves. So you would know, oh, that's a grave. And it was a visual reminder, I'm not walking near that, that is death, okay? Kind of that extra biblical, yes, we've got biblical where God says don't touch the dead. They would go so far as to set aside distances they needed to remain from graves, from dead bodies. And he's saying, you're not even marking yourself as being dead and deceased. You're letting people come and be fully surrounded by you and around you, and he is calling them corpses. He is saying to the religious leaders at the time, he's saying to the Pharisees, he's saying to ones trying to lead the people in their relationship with God, y'all dead. That's the Rob translation. So people just walking all over you. And again, our appearance, we've got to understand, it's a love for God, not a look at me. Jesus is getting heavy on correction. Can correction be kindness? We'll do it again. Can correction be kindness? Yes. Okay, that's fair. Some people correct in an unkind way. Jesus, we're going to assume. We'll make an assumption here that he loves these guys. You know he wants to be like, you're right, Jesus. You know he wants the hearts to break and him to come to him. Here's what's awesome. I love this section. Teacher, said an expert in religious law. Well, you've insulted us too with what you've just said. Yes. Just to put yourself in that place of that dialogue. Just to be someone maybe serving the meal and you would, chuckle and almost drop the tray as you hear it going on. Yes, said Jesus. What sorrow awaits you? Woe to you too. You crush people with unbearable religious demands. And you never lift a finger to ease the burden. I want to say as my role, the role of the shepherds here, the role of the deacons, we should be, this is going to sound weird, we should be finger lifters. Okay? That all of us should be going out of our way to do what we can to ease the burden of walking in faith for each of us individually. And understand that we want to care for each other. But too often, and some of you guys have experienced this, some guys, you've known this, you come to grow your relationship with the Lord, and people put more weight on you. Wait, you're telling me I have to do this and that? And all of a sudden, more is put upon you. And let me explain it this way. What is legalism? It's expecting others to dress up just like you. What is legalism? Hey, this is how we do it here. Play the part. Get in character. Act the way you need to act. And guys, this can be tough because there can be something intended out of love, but if we recognize that kindness is pulled away, it becomes legalism. And we've got to be careful that we're not walking through the things that we're trying to care for one another and putting legal burdens upon one another. Because we know this is what we know. Jesus says this in John 16:33. I've told you these things. And these things are, he's talking about the Holy Spirit coming, him having to depart, him going away. He says, I've told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble. Take heart. I've overcome the world. And I want to say this again. Not in your current position will you have peace. Not in your day-to-day activities will you have peace. He's saying it's in me. And some of us are really trying to grasp peace. We're trying to do better, get a better job, attain more things, find a healthier lifestyle. We're trying to grab peace and get a little piece of peace. And we're told here, as the Prince of Peace says, hey, it's in me. It is in me. And some of us, we're just absolutely frustrated because there's difficult situations, there's unmet expectations, and frankly, we just have a limited perception of this Prince of Peace. In this world, you will have trouble. That's not a bumper sticker verse, is it? I feel like it should be more often. In this world, you will have trouble. Hey, I need this section right here to tell the rest of the church, in this world, you're going to have trouble. Don't smile when you do it, though. That's not what I'm asking. But if you guys just let it be known to the rest of the congregation. Can you repeat that sentence, in this world, you'll have trouble? Give it to them.
In this world, you'll have trouble.
Okay, let's hear. Trouble's going to happen. Health concerns, financial concerns, just people concerns. There's going to be trouble. But hey, he's calling us to let us know there is peace, and the peace is in him. He's saying, take heart. It's going to be hard. Take heart. I've overcome the world. Matthew 11:30, he says, my yoke is easy, my burden is light. And if we come to a place of faith and we feel like, why is everything so heavy? The problem is it's not what Jesus is putting on us, it's the legalism put on us. Expectations put on us. Acting a part put on us. And we need to be able to just take a deep breath and say, it's Jesus. It's Jesus. It's peace in Jesus. So what am I trying to get to with table manners? Let me make it simple. If I were to talk to some of my kids and you were to show up on your first day of 5th grade looking like this, how would things go? You know, we don't wear a mask. You want to try it, don't you? I'm going to do it. I'm going to put the mask on. Say you're about to meet your future in-laws for the first time, okay? You've been dating for a while, you know engagement's coming, and you're about to have that first meal, okay? It's not too formal, but it's kind of the informal, like get to know before the real formal one comes. We're talking like Texas Roadhouse or something. It's not like the going to the house one. You know what I'm talking about. You guys have been there. And you show up to meet the future in-laws like this. Things probably aren't going to go well, okay? Some parents are going to pull their son aside and go, hey, what's up? And did you know these are called ski masks and not robber masks? I wasted a lot of time on Google trying to find a good robber mask picture, but they're called ski masks, okay. What if you're hired in? You accept a job, you see a posting, hey, I need someone to come work, and you say, oh, I'm on it, you send them messages, and you haven't met face-to-face, but you've agreed to come to this new job, they're going to try you out, and you show up like this. I mean, how do you even respond to that? What if it's a group of friends say, hey, we'd love you to come worship with us. We love you to come to church. In fact, tell you what, we're going to pick you up. Hey, we'll see you. We're going to pick you up. It's church. Everyone runs late. We'll pick you up about 9:55. And we'll take you into church. And your three friends greet you like this. You'd go, what? Huh? Here's what we need to understand, what Jesus is trying to get across in Luke 11. There is to be no mask when we come to the table. There is to be no mask. Here's the problem. Some of us, you're like, yeah, okay. You say church face and work face. Uh-oh. Do people know you the same here on Sunday as they would know you at school, at work, in the neighborhood? There is to be no mask at the table. Here's the problem. Some of you think, I don't want them to see the real me. It's ugly. I don't want them to see the real me because there's a whole lot of scars. I don't want them to see me because I don't think they'll ever want to see me again. We've got to stand, all of us, to understand the concept of humility. There is no hypocrite. To come in humility means to completely strip away whatever falsehood and fakeness we've got. Come open, come broken, come honestly humbled before Jesus. This is who I really am. It hurts when you condemn yourself, like in a sermon. Do you guys know what method acting is? If you don't, method acting is when you know, like, you're going to play a part in a movie and you take it on so much you live it out. For example, some method actors, Robert De Niro, when he did the movie Taxi, or Taxi Driver, whatever it's called, he was running 12-hour shifts as a cabbie between takes. Daniel Day-Lewis is a known method actor. When the movie Lincoln came out, for 9 months or so, he was Abraham Lincoln. Slept in a bed like Lincoln, wore the clothes like Lincoln, talked in the same vernacular as Lincoln. And what we need to understand is, myself, and I'm talking here, sometimes we've gotten so deep in our method acting, we don't know who we really are. That we have begun to play the role so well that we think that's who we really are. That we take that on as our identity. You know, if Daniel Day-Lewis were to come up to you and say, well, I'm Abraham Lincoln, you'd be like, oh yeah, and play along with it. But it's a farce. And I'm gonna talk to those raised in the church right now. I'm gonna talk to those that have been around it the longest. That my fear is that some of us, as we have walked into faith, we have been doing nothing but method acting. We've never been real. We've never been raw. We saw some acting and we followed along. And we've been doing it our whole lives. And we have never honestly taken off the mask and been real with who we are before others and before Christ. My biggest fear is that there are some of us, it's been charades the whole time. And we are yet to be honest with ourselves and honest with God. That we've invested so much into playing a role, we can't separate ourselves from it. That it's going to take a little bit of effort to actually pull the mask off to get to a place of being real. There are some of you that you think you know what faith is out of the function of what you've seen growing up. How your parents, how those around you acted, and you've just kind of morphed into that role. Never taking a real honest look at your own faith life. It's funny to me as I study and I hear about people talking about their coming to faith moment. And I'm hearing more and more often about people saying they're coming to faith moments. And that there's this constant ability of the Spirit to keep pulling layers off that we've been wearing and getting down to the true core of who we are. And let's be honest, some of us will show our real hands, but we hide other parts. Some of us will talk openly and almost in a kind of a braggadocious way about our struggles and about our stumbling. But there's some stuff we're really hiding. Some stuff we're really holding back. And some stuff that we've buried many layers deep underneath a mask, underneath a role that we have perfected. And it's not us. It's just acting. As we talk about the table, Jesus, out of the most kind-hearted he can, is trying to correct the falsehood. Trying to correct those that are playing the part and have yet to give in their heart. And I want to say for those, and again, I'm trying to touch a certain group that you've seen it your whole life, and so you've almost morphed into it. There's got to be a time we remove the mask. And there's got to be a time we really know Jesus for who he is, because we really take an honest look at how awful our hearts are. And I will tell you this. God, his Son, and the Spirit, you will be overwhelmed by how awesome they are when you get to that place of truly understanding, man, I'm awful. I can't believe he loves me. I can't believe he loves me. And we don't say this out loud, but some of us, we're in the place because we're method acting. Well, of course he loves me. Have you seen me? We don't say that out loud. But it's how we act, how we walk, and how we live. This morning, the goal is to come to the table. This morning, the goal is to recognize our manners. In a moment, we're going to sing. We're going to sing, "Give Us Clean Hands" again. It's not about the hands. It's not about the hands. It's about the heart. And those hands get clean out of a heart that in high definition has seen the love, the mercy, and the grace of Jesus Christ. Take off the mask. Take off the mask. If you'll join me in a moment, we're going to stand and sing. And this time as you sing, as you recognize, where am I faking it? Let it be an exhale of praise. Let it be a time of praise as we walk through this. And then we'll join at the table.